gun to me. So why is it that now I need to state people who we don't know who they are or what their background is? Why are we even giving them authority to declare that I have no right to have a gun? And so I do see the similarity. I think it's, to your original question, I think it's even more grossly extensive when you say that, no, you don't have a right to bear arms. You know, if here in Washington State, it tells us that it's constitutionally protected by the state, the right to bear arms.
Unfortunately, citizens are too fucking lazy to stand up.
And I think that's even broader protection than the U.S. government. So yeah, I see it's very offensive in that right.
Well, and the magazine limit, saying you can't even possess a magazine that is capable of holding more than 10. Is that a constitutional?
Hell no, it's not.
No, there's nothing that indicates that historically that's been appropriate. In fact, I find it interesting that the state of Oregon in the Measure 114 litigation actually addressed the Poway shooting. And if you don't recall that was a 2019 shooting of a synagogue in San Diego County. What they talk about is the individual had a 10-round magazine plus 5 10-rounders strapped to him. And unfortunately, we didn't get to this point on Friday. And then
hold that thought for just a second. I'm going to hold Pete Serrano over into the next segment if he's got the time. It's a Monday. It's the Radio Northwest Network, and it's your opportunity to sound off at 866 Hey Lars. Send your emails to talk@LarsLarson.com.
I don't want to get going because I keep you here too long because you know all what what I've said, and you know what I've done, and you know what we're doing, and I know what you're doing. Let me close with this.
He's the president now, baby. He don't even know his name.
This is the Lars Larson Show. Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's the Radio Northwest Network serving the Pacific Northwest states of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. And Pete Serrano is one of the attorneys who filed an amicus brief in the now 5 lawsuits that have been filed to block Oregon's ballot measure 114. Among other things, it is a de facto ban on all gun sales starting Thursday.
It sure
and
is.
ending, well, God knows when. Because it might end in a couple of months, might end in 6 months. I mean, we've had all kinds of representations from the lawyers. Pete, you started to tell the story involving the Poway shooting. Now, as I remember, that was at a synagogue in Poway, California, about 3 years ago. And you were saying the killer in that case, the shooter in that case, had a gun, an AR-15 platform, but he had a 10-round magazine and a whole bunch of other 10-round magazines. And you said in court on Friday, you never quite got to what point.
Yeah, that 11th round is always the problem, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Lars. Good synopsis. So he had an AR-10 and all those 10-round magazines. And with that, the state of Oregon's attorney, when the judge asked him, what about magazines with less than 10 rounds, or 10 rounds or less, excuse me, he said, go ahead, game on. You can have however many you want. And what I really wanted to do at that time, and unfortunately we were proceeding to closing, we didn't get a chance to jump on this, I wanted to say, listen, in Poway, you had 10-round magazines. People died. One person died, I believe. Several were injured. And guess who stopped this? An off-duty police officer who used his firearm to cease this, who shot at.
Yeah,
and
no
unfortunately,
shit.
the news didn't tell us how many rounds he had. But the point is, if you're trying to cease gun violence, which the state admits is the purpose of this, 10 rounds, 11 rounds, 15 rounds, 6 rounds, people will still use firearms negatively, and ceasing the sales of more than 10 rounds does not.
Just like hammers and screwdrivers and knives and everything else. Yep.
And so I really want to point out that inherent inconsistency, not just in the Poway story, but in the state's attorney general's representation that, hey, have as many 10-round magazines as you want. Those are safe.
Well,
Again, it's not for us a safety issue, it's a constitutional issue.
See, and I get the impression this judge may or may not be as Karen Emergut. I don't know. I may have met her once over the years, but I don't really recall. But somebody with, a pistol or two and a whole backpack, a kid's backpack full of magazines, I think is almost more dangerous than the person who's got one 30-round magazine. because anybody who's familiar with changing out magazines,
Yeah,
it takes
I don't.
maybe a second
Man,
at most.
there should be
to
no
change the magazine, so it
laws
doesn't change
against
the
the
picture.
Second
Now, I've had some
Amendment.
pro-gun
Period.
friends of mine
Shall
say, well,
not
don't
be
tell them that.
infringed.
They'll have us down to one shot. We'll all be Barney Fife walking around with one round in our pocket, and nothing in the gun, because they'll want to take us to zero. But you make a good point. And when you talk about the cops and what they usually carry, many of them carry, 9mm pistols that carry many more than 10 rounds. And yet under this law, as I understand it, I mean, I know some of it's going to go to the lawyers if it stays in effect and is not struck down. An off-duty cop who on duty carries a pistol that may hold 15 rounds or even 17 rounds is going to be limited to a 10-round magazine because he's off duty. And he wouldn't be able to carry his on-duty gun off, and most cops are encouraged strongly to carry a gun off-duty so that if they run into a situation, they can deal with it. And we've certainly all seen body cam and other videos where cops are confronted by 2 or 3 suspects. And with 2 or 3 suspects, if any of them is or are armed, or some of them are armed, having as many rounds as you can possibly get makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the misnomers the court, and I'll say courts because we're litigating the 10-round magazine up in Washington as well, the Senate Bill 5078. One of the misnomers that I think the courts continually hinge on is, well, there's no statistic, or the statistics are very low of people who have used firearms in self-defense. And it's
Fuck
like, well,
that
first,
shit. Shall not be infringed, man. Period.
To shoot someone in self-defense is to make sure that I need it in case,
God.
right?
Right.
So
like
this
a
misnomer
seatbelt.
of, perfect example. One of my colleagues said that. He's like, seatbelts are ineffective.
Everybody
today in the
should
car
be
crash
armed,
today.
man.
Well, no,
Jeez.
seatbelt was effective. It did its job, and it was prepared to do it in the event that you needed it. It's same thing. Perfect example. And so, one thing I want to do is, as we continue to work down these analyses, kind of tell the courts, listen, it's not just did you fire it in self-defense. I don't think many people that carry guns want to fire them, but they want to have them in the event they need them.
Right. I mean, I tell people I've got a fire extinguisher here in the studio. Has my studio ever caught fire? No. Will I always have a current fire extinguisher on the wall? Yep. Do I expect to ever need it? No. But if I don't have it and I do need it, then I'm screwed. And I guess
Yep.
we haven't even gotten into, and I don't know whether the court case are going to get into, the huge invasion in
Everybody
people's
should be carrying.
lives of saying, if you buy a gun post Measure 114, if it stays in effect, you will be put in a statewide database that will be created for the first time
no
ever.
shit. I mean, this
And
is just scary.
Your information will be published
Yep.
because M114 requires it
Yep,
once
yep.
a year. So if a young lady who decides I'm going to protect myself from an ex-boyfriend or ex-husband or whatever goes and buys a pistol, all you've got to do is look it up. She owns a gun. And now you've got information about her that I'm pretty sure many people would say, I don't want that information shared. It will now be shared with the general public and anybody who wants to know it, including thieves who might want to target you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the worst of all bad laws, right? It's not just prohibiting how you can use or what you can use.
And it was
making your identity out
pushed
there
by
and
Lutheran and pastors
really
in
violating
Portland.
every
Yep.
component of individual rights, whether it's the protection of the constitutional right to bear arms or if it's the right to privacy. I mean, it's amazing. I guess on one hand, I look at the folks that wrote this. And
I don't need a permit to exercise the constitutional right.
A lot of people didn't catch that on the
Jeez.
state. It's a pretty lengthy law or a bill, and
I get pissed off about this
unfortunately,
shit.
it wasn't caught, and hopefully, we'll be able to overturn this either immediately.
You mentioned Washington State. Jay Inslee apparently plans to go ahead with this law from 4 years ago, 1639, that mandates an annual background check. Now,
Yeah,
I've got a dog in the fight
bullshit.
on this. I own some guns, pistols, and rifles. This thing says Jay Inslee and his crowd of bureaucrats get to run a background check on me once a year.
Hello, Washingtonians.
And what they're going to do with that information, I assume they think sometime they're going to find, well, Lars didn't have a felony last year. I don't. And he has a felony now. I don't. And so we're going to go to his house with a SWAT team, and we're going to raid his house, and strip him of all his firearms. Is that, I mean, this is the kind of craziness
This is
that
like
Democrat governors
fucking
and Democrat
Twilight Zone
governments
shit,
get up
man.
to. And they apparently now say, even though they've ignored the law, the requirement of the annual background check for just because, they're now going to
Unbelievable.
start doing the annual background checks on what, 1 million or a couple of million people who've done nothing wrong, who've broken no law, who there's no probable cause to believe they've done anything wrong, but we're just going to background check them just for because. Pete, I hope you guys get on top
I
of
guess
that one as well.
it's going to be a
Steve
fair use
Serrano, he's
notice
one of the
here,
attorneys who's filed an amicus
commenting
brief.
on what's going on. So anyway, man, the Northwest is just screwed up. Anyway, guys, peace out. Have a good day.